in mid-action. This is something which takes time. It cannot be stopped in a millisecond. And also, you know, this really is not a movie. We're not here to save Private Ryan. We're here to guarantee the safety and security of 1 million Israelis who for years have been shelled indiscriminately by Qassam rockets. Now, even after the Security Council resolution, those rockets, long-range missiles, kept being fired from Gaza into Israeli towns, villages, schools and kindergartens. So, you know, the Security Council has said and talked the talk. Now it is up to the Hamas to walk the walk and to prove that they will truly cease fire. Otherwise, if Israel today ceases fire and returns to the status quo which existed before this operation started, this has all been for nothing, and we cannot afford to waste and endanger the life of our citizens just because the Security Council feels that's the time to do it.
The United States abstained from the vote, but interestingly enough, it didn't use its power of veto. Does that disappoint you that your ally is not standing by you as firmly as it usually does?
Well, I was at the UN for nearly 6 years and always counted on the very firm support and always appreciated the very firm understanding and support of the United States. The fact that the United States today abstained and did not cast a veto is for the United States State Department to explain. I do not understand the reasoning for it. I don't think that the United States, indeed, I don't think any other member of the Security Council, including Britain, France or Russia, would stand for 1 minute for the horrible attacks which Israelis have withstood for 8 years. So it is very easy to sit on the East River in Manhattan and cast a vote. I don't know how many members of the Security Council have actually visited the region. I don't know how many of them actually know where Gaza is. On the other hand, Condoleezza Rice has been here and does know, and therefore from her I would have expected a more firm commitment and a more firm belief that Israel is truly entitled to take care of its citizens.
It's interesting,
and defend itself,
but doesn't that reveal something to you? Sorry to interrupt you. Doesn't that reveal something to you that the US is not standing by as firmly as before? We've got pictures of protests from all over the world, from here in Qatar, in Jordan, in Venezuela, Britain, Egypt, etc. It seems as if you're not winning in the public relations stakes. Maybe it's time for you to change strategy, Mr. Gillerman.
Well, you know, this is not a public relations exercise, and as I said before, this is not a movie, this is real life. And as you very well know, most of the countries you have now outlined, and many, many others, including many in the Arab and Muslim world, many of your allies and neighbors and friends, have applauded and lauded Israel's action. We've heard a country like Egypt at the very beginning say that Hamas was actually getting what they deserved. Now, wars are not a pretty sight, and the pictures coming out of Gaza are certainly not pretty. And therefore, as time goes by, it is only natural that world public opinion and the sympathy and understanding for Israel may get eroded with time. But we cannot conduct our lives and we cannot conduct our security based on public opinion or on compliments which we get from the outside. We have to make sure that we take care of our citizens as any country, including every single member of the Security Council.
You mentioned the responsibility to protect citizens.
Qatar or any other country in the world would do.
Ambassador Gillerman, you mentioned the responsibility to protect your citizens. No one disputes that. Every country has a right to protect its citizens. But what about those whose borders, whose airspace, whose seacoast you control? Those who rely on your decisions for their fuel, for their food, for their electricity supplies, for medical services. Surely you also have a responsibility and a duty to protect them and not to bomb them.
We're not denying our responsibility, and we're in fact doing every single day huge efforts to supply the people of Gaza with whom we have no war. We're making a very clear distinction.
You've killed 800 of them so far.
Who are indeed in a hostage situation. You know the situation in Gaza, and you have reporters there, so you know how densely populated it is. When you're dealing with a brutal and cynical enemy who is actually controlling a hostage situation and has taken a whole population hostage and is hiding behind the skirts of women and grabbing children in order to protect themselves and in order to shield behind, it is very, very difficult for innocent people not to get killed. The only difference is that while for us every dead Palestinian child is a horrible mistake and a tragedy, for them every dead Israeli child is a huge success and a cause for celebration. They are targeting civilians, we are targeting military targets,
Ambassador
but because
Gillerman,
of the nature of our enemy, who you choose to call fighters, but the whole world recognizes as terrorists,
Ambassador
sometimes
Gillerman,
innocent people pay the price.
One question here. Are you using white phosphorus in Gaza?
I have no idea what the Israeli army is using in Gaza, but I trust the judgment and also the statements made by the Israeli army that the weapons and the equipment they're using is fully in compliance with the Geneva Convention.
It's interesting because in the past, 2 years ago, you said the same thing. Another Israeli spokesman said the same thing. When over 1 million cluster bombs were dropped by your army in the last few days of the war in Lebanon. And that was after a ceasefire was agreed. Can you guarantee that something similar won't happen now?
We, first of all, did not drop any bombs 2 days after a ceasefire was agreed. I was there when that ceasefire was agreed. I was part of the team that drafted Resolution 1701, and it clearly gave Israel another 60 hours from the minute it was drafted to carry out its activities. And therefore, I don't know what's going to happen now. As I said, I don't think this is something that can be stopped in mid-action. I assure you, though, that if the Hamas stops the firing of rockets, if it stops its terror activities, if it stops the smuggling and rearming, Israel will be the first to agree to a ceasefire, and we'll be very happy to see it happen immediately.
Ambassador Gillerman, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency has suspended its operations in Gaza. You would agree with me that that's a catastrophe, and it's a catastrophe caused by Israel?
No, it's not a catastrophe caused by Israel. It's a catastrophe caused by Hamas. All the evil that is engulfing Gaza, all the horrible things that are indeed happening in Gaza today are a result of the Hamas taking over that place by coup and keeping its people hostage. I have to remind you again, you're taking me back 2 years. Let me take you back 3.5 years when we left Gaza. Every single inch of Gaza. And the Palestinians then had a choice to make it into a place where they could raise their children and look after their quality of life and their standard of living. Instead, they chose
will you help them along that path by ending the blockade? Will you give them the opportunity? Will you give them the opportunity by ending the blockade so that they can develop, as you say, into a state that can stand on its own 2 feet?
We have given them an opportunity, but unfortunately, as Abba Ibn said, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. We left Gaza at a huge price for Israel in a very heart-wrenching and painful disengagement. They had the opportunity. They could have proven to themselves, to their people, and to the rest of the world that they can run their own affairs, that they can bring back the rule of law and look after the people. Instead of that, they burnt greenhouses we left for them. They have taken the people hostage and they've turned it into a terror base. And I really would ask you, what would you do? What would the people in Doha do if they were bombed by one of their neighbors? You certainly wouldn't send them bouquets of flowers.
And as we've said before, Doha has not occupied one of its neighbors for 41 years, sir. Surely the occupation is at the root of all of this.
Yes. May I remind you that Israel is over 60 years old, and even before what you and everybody else so conveniently calls occupation, the Arab states have never recognized it and were always intent on destroying it. And once again, we ended our occupation, so-called occupation, in Gaza nearly 3.5 years ago, and what we got in return is a vicious, indiscriminate attack on our schools and kindergarten. So I think unfortunately, sadly, tragically, the Palestinians in Gaza may be hit by Israeli bullets, but they are truly the victims of the Hamas and the terror regime they have imposed, the stranglehold they have on that city.
Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Dan Gillerman, thank you very much for joining us. Now we've got some